On the afternoon of December 3rd, 1998, 40-year-old Julie Jensen was found dead in her bed at her home in Pleasant Prairie, Wisconsin. Her husband, Mark Jensen, was the one who discovered her body and immediately notified the authorities. When Kenosha County District Attorney Bob Jambois arrived at the scene, he took note of several unusual details. Julie's nose appeared to be pushed to one side, and one of her arms was positioned underneath her body in a way that seemed unnatural. Despite these observations, there were no visible signs of trauma or any clear indication of what had caused her death. Mark informed the investigators that Julie had been feeling physically unwell for several days before her death. According to him, she had visited a doctor and had been prescribed the antidepressant Paxil just days prior. He explained that she had been struggling emotionally and had shown signs of depression. These statements provided the only context available at the time, as there was nothing outwardly apparent at the scene to suggest foul play. In the absence of conclusive evidence at the scene, law enforcement officers conducted a full search of the residence. As part of standard investigative procedure, they seized the family's desktop computer, hoping to uncover any information that might shed light on Julie's sudden and unexplained death. With few physical clues and limited medical findings available initially, the investigation into Julie Jensen's death remained open-ended. Her passing, though not immediately classified as suspicious, raised quiet but persistent questions that would gradually build into a case far more complex than anyone could have anticipated. Julie Jensen was a Wisconsin native, born into a large family as one of 6 siblings. She grew up with strong Midwestern roots, surrounded by the steady values of close-knit community life. During her early working years, Julie took a job at Sears, where she met Mark Jensen. Their relationship began as a workplace connection and developed into a long-term commitment that extended through their college years. In the spring of 1984, the couple married, beginning a new chapter of their lives together. They eventually settled in Pleasant Prairie, Wisconsin, an affluent and peaceful suburb located just 1 block from Lake Michigan. The Jensens purchased a home in this upscale neighborhood, building what appeared to be a stable and prosperous life. Julie pursued a professional path in finance, working as an administrative assistant at a brokerage firm. Her dedication to her career was evident through her earning of a Series 7 license, a credential that highlighted her financial knowledge and professional competency. After the birth of their first son, David, in 1990, Julie made the decision to step away from her career to focus on raising her family. A few years later, the couple welcomed their second son, Douglas. Julie embraced her role as a full-time mother, dedicating her energy to her children and home. She was known for her involvement in family life and appeared to those around her as a devoted wife and caring mother. This background paints Julie not as a victim alone, but as a woman with a full and active life. In the days following Julie Jensen's death, investigators remained puzzled. The initial toxicology reports offered no answers, showing no trace of drugs or substances that could explain her sudden and unexplained passing. With no visible injuries and a clean toxicology screen, the investigation seemed to stall. However, a key piece of evidence was already in their possession: the family's home computer. As authorities examined the content of the computer, they uncovered a disturbing detail. Someone in the household had recently searched for information about ethylene glycol, a highly toxic chemical compound found in antifreeze. This alarming digital footprint reignited suspicion and prompted investigators to take a deeper look into the toxicology evidence. A second round of blood testing was ordered. This time, a forensic toxicologist discovered traces of ethylene glycol in Julie's system. The results indicated that the poison had not been consumed in a single dose, but rather ingested gradually over several days. This finding was critical. The method of ingestion, along with the lack of antifreeze found anywhere in the home, raised immediate concerns about the nature of Julie's death. Investigators ruled out accidental poisoning, or suicide, and began to suspect foul play. Prosecutors Bob Jambois and Angelina Gabriel closely examined the new forensic evidence. The slow administration of the toxic substance strongly suggested premeditation. It was not the result of a sudden act, but rather the execution of a deliberate plan. The investigation began shifting in tone and direction, now building a case for homicide. The digital evidence, paired with the toxicology findings, marked a pivotal moment. What had started as a medical mystery was now taking the form of a calculated and methodical murder. For years before her death, Julie Jensen reported disturbing incidents of harassment to the Pleasant Prairie Police Department. The incidents began shortly after she admitted to having a brief affair with a coworker. Anonymous hang-up phone calls became a regular occurrence at the Jensen residence. More alarmingly, pornographic images were repeatedly placed around their property. These images were found in their yard, inside the garage, and even on Mark Jensen's car while it was parked at his workplace. At the time, the harassment appeared to be linked to someone outside the household. Police considered the man Julie had once been involved with, but he had since relocated to North Carolina and was later ruled out as a suspect. Despite the alarming pattern, the source of the harassment remained officially unidentified during the early stages of the investigation. As the case developed, new information emerged that shifted the narrative. Analysis of the family's home computer revealed that Mark Jensen had been involved in a romantic relationship with a co-worker named Kelly Labonte. The affair had been ongoing before Julie's death. Just weeks after Julie passed away, Labonte moved into the Jensen home, raising questions about the nature and timing of their relationship. During a police interview 4 months after his wife's death, Mark claimed that Labonte was merely a friend, despite evidence to the contrary. The discovery of this affair, paired with Julie's history of harassment, introduced troubling signs of deception and psychological manipulation within the marriage. The outward appearance of a stable household concealed deep fractures beneath the surface. For investigators, this web of secrecy and control added crucial context to the growing theory that Julie's death was not only premeditated but emotionally and psychologically motivated. Among the most haunting developments in the investigation was the emergence of a letter written by Julie Jensen shortly before her death. Sensing that something was deeply wrong, Julie confided her fears in writing and entrusted the sealed letter to a trusted neighbor. She instructed the neighbor to give it to the police if anything ever happened to her. The letter would later become a powerful piece of evidence, offering a direct voice from Julie beyond the grave. In the letter, Julie expressed clear and disturbing concerns about her safety. She wrote that if she were to die unexpectedly, her husband Mark should be considered her first suspect. Her fears were not vague or speculative. She referred to a specific and alarming discovery. Julie had come across a handwritten list in Mark's datebook, which included entries such as drug supply, razors, and a syringe. These findings, combined with his erratic and suspicious behavior, led her to believe that her life might be in danger. Julie concluded the letter with a solemn hope that she was wrong, but admitted that she feared an early demise. The letter's emotional and evidentiary significance was immense, but presented a legal dilemma. Because the author was deceased, the defense would not be able to cross-examine her, raising questions about the letter's admissibility in court. Still, the letter's clarity, detail, and timing made it impossible to ignore. Despite the legal challenges, the letter would become central to the prosecution's case in the first trial. It captured Julie's growing awareness of the danger around her and provided a chilling premonition of the tragedy that soon followed. Following a steadily growing body of evidence, Mark Jensen was arrested and charged with the first-degree murder of his wife, Julie Jensen. Despite the severity of the charge, he was able to post $500,000 in cash bail and was released pending trial. Rather than maintaining a low profile, Mark moved forward with his life. He started a construction business, married his former coworker and romantic partner, Kelly Labonte, and the couple went on to have a child together. For a time, it seemed Mark had left the investigation and tragedy behind. Then, in 2006, a crucial breakthrough emerged. Ed Klug, one of Mark's former coworkers, came forward with chilling information. Klug stated that just weeks before Julie's death, Mark had spoken to him over drinks and expressed a deep hatred for his wife. More disturbingly, Mark reportedly said that he could kill her. The statement, made so close to the time of Julie's death, provided prosecutors with critical evidence of motive and premeditation. The legal case gained further momentum when a judge ruled that Julie's letter, written before her death and naming Mark as her first suspect, could be admitted into evidence. This decision marked a significant turning point. With the letter and Klug's testimony, the case was set for trial in 2008. During the proceedings, prosecutors presented a carefully constructed case built on circumstantial evidence and witness accounts. One of the most impactful testimonies came from Aaron Dillard, a jailhouse informant. Dillard told the court that Mark had confessed to poisoning Julie with antifreeze. According to Dillard, Julie's health visibly declined, prompting concern from the couple's sons. Mark allegedly told the boys he would call for help if their mother was not better after school. Instead, Dillard testified, Mark panicked and suffocated Julie with a pillow to ensure her death before they returned. The prosecution's strategy focused on a cumulative narrative: the pattern of harassment, the extramarital affair, forensic findings, and Julie's prophetic letter. Together, these elements portrayed a calculated plan. The 2008 trial concluded with Mark Jensen being found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. Mark Jensen's initial conviction in 2008 brought a sense of closure to those seeking justice for Julie Jensen. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. However, that closure would prove temporary. Years later, the conviction faced a critical legal challenge. An appellate court reviewed the case and determined that the introduction of Julie's letter at trial had violated Mark's constitutional rights. Since the letter's author could not be cross-examined, the court ruled that its admission as evidence was improper. As a result, the conviction was overturned and a new trial was ordered. The decision marked a significant setback for prosecutors. Julie's letter had served as one of the most compelling pieces of evidence in the original trial. With the letter excluded, the prosecution was forced to reconsider their strategy for the retrial. The case returned to court in 2023, more than 2 decades after Julie's death. This time, the prosecution relied on newly emphasized digital forensic evidence. A computer expert was brought in to examine data from the Jensen household computer. The expert's analysis revealed that Mark himself had been behind the years-long harassment campaign directed at Julie. The hang-up phone calls and distribution of pornographic images, initially believed to be the work of an unknown stalker, were traced back to Mark. This discovery reshaped the narrative, placing direct responsibility on him for psychologically tormenting Julie following her brief affair. By establishing a pattern of calculated and sustained emotional abuse, prosecutors demonstrated Mark's capacity for control and manipulation. They argued that Julie's mental and emotional deterioration in the months before her death was not coincidental, but orchestrated by her husband. Despite the absence of the powerful letter, the prosecution's revised approach proved successful. The jury found Mark Jensen guilty once again of first-degree intentional homicide. The court sentenced him to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The 2023 verdict reaffirmed the justice system's commitment to holding him accountable and brought finality to a case that spanned over 2 decades, ensuring that Julie Jensen's voice, though legally silenced, was still heard through the facts and evidence presented. The case of Julie Jensen left a lasting imprint on both the legal system and the public's understanding of domestic abuse behind closed doors. While her handwritten letter was ultimately deemed inadmissible in the courtroom, its emotional power resonated far beyond legal boundaries. The letter served as a deeply personal and courageous warning, a woman documenting her fear and suspicion, hoping it might one day make a difference. Though suppressed during the retrial, it remained central in shaping how investigators, the media, and the public perceived the case. Julie's death and the years-long fight for justice became emblematic of a hidden form of domestic violence, emotional and psychological abuse cloaked in a facade of suburban normalcy. Her story shed light on how such abuse can escalate silently, and how even in seemingly stable homes, dangerous dynamics can remain undetected until tragedy strikes. The legal debate surrounding the case also sparked broader discussions about evidentiary standards in homicide trials. The challenges around using posthumous letters in jailhouse confessions highlighted the delicate balance between protecting constitutional rights and ensuring that critical evidence is not excluded. Ultimately, the Jensen case reinforced the vital role of persistence, forensic science, and digital investigation in modern criminal justice. The path to Mark Jensen's conviction was long and legally complex, but underscored the importance of thorough investigative work and a justice system willing to adapt. Julie's voice, though never heard in court, left an indelible mark. Her story continues to serve as a powerful reminder of the need to recognize and act upon signs of abuse, no matter how well hidden.
David Lewis, fondly known as Fishhook, earned his nickname for a simple reason. He could always reel in a fish, no matter where he was. His skill at fishing became more than just a hobby. It was a part of his identity. Friends and family say the name suited him perfectly. Whether it was a remote lake or a quiet stream, David had a way of connecting with nature that few others did. His passion for the outdoors and his talent for fishing made him a memorable figure in the Oregon community where he lived. But David was more than just a fisherman. He was known for his helpfulness and his ability to fix almost anything. If someone needed a hand, David would be there. Those who knew him often described him as someone who could do anything and was always willing to step up. His charisma, combined with a warm and generous nature, earned him deep respect and affection. His sister, Linda Lewis Miller, remembers him with pride. She speaks of a man who was not only kind-hearted, but also carried a free-spirited energy that drew people in. He loved the peacefulness of nature, the rhythm of the water, and the quiet satisfaction of a successful catch. These simple joys reflected his character. Today, David's memory lives on through those who loved him. Though his death was tragic and remains unresolved, the family continues to cherish the person he was. They hold on to the moments of laughter, the fishing trips, and the man who always had time for others. In their hearts, David Lewis is remembered not for how he died, but for how he lived with kindness, skill, and spirit. On September 4th, 2008, fire broke out in a remote area near Lake Hyatt, Oregon. Emergency responders received reports of a structure fire and rushed to the scene. The first location they reached was a cabin situated roughly 5 miles from another property in the area. This initial fire drew the bulk of attention and resources, but it was not the only blaze that day. Second cabin David Lewis's was also burning. When responders arrived at David's property, they were met with a disturbing discovery. Inside the remains of David Lewis's cabin, firefighters and investigators found his body. The structure had been severely damaged by the flames, and the extent of destruction made immediate identification difficult. The discovery shifted the situation. From a typical fire response to the scene of a possible crime, authorities secured the area and began a detailed examination of the evidence. Subsequent forensic and police investigations revealed that David had suffered injuries prior to the fire. This crucial detail indicated that his death was not accidental. He had been killed before the fire was set, and the blaze appeared to have been intentionally started to cover up the crime. The fact that another cabin was set ablaze 5 miles away on the same day raised further concerns. Whether this was a calculated diversion or simply a disturbing coincidence remains unknown. Despite the gravity of the findings, no motive was immediately clear. There were no eyewitnesses, no known disputes, and no suspects. The remote location and the destruction caused by the fire left investigators with limited leads. The absence of concrete answers marked the beginning of a long and frustrating process for law enforcement and for David's family. What happened at that cabin remains one of the most pressing questions in the case. Before any news was delivered, Linda Lewis Miller felt something was wrong. It was not based on a phone call or a message, just a deep, inexplicable sense of unease. The feeling lingered, unsettling and persistent, though she could not name it at the time. It was a warning she would soon understand. Linda first came across the news through an online article. A report described a fire at a cabin in Oregon and mentioned that a body had been discovered inside. The victim had not yet been identified, but Linda could not shake the fear that it might be her brother. The details, location, timing, circumstances were too close to ignore. A quiet alarm went off in her heart, acting on growing concern. Linda shared the article with her husband, Greg Miller. He, too, felt the gravity of the situation and took immediate action. Greg contacted the local fire marshal, hoping for clarity. His call was not based on certainty, but it was driven by instinct and care for the man they both feared was gone. That call marked the beginning of the family's involvement in the identification process. The hours that followed were filled with anxiety and waiting. There was no confirmation yet, only the heavy silence of possibility. For Linda, those moments were clouded by the reality that her brother might have died under horrifying circumstances. The idea that the body in the cabin could be David was difficult to accept, but impossible to ignore. Though they had no answers yet, the weight of what they feared settled over the family. In the space between suspicion and confirmation, Linda and her loved ones were left with only questions, fear, the unsettling sense that their lives had just changed forever. The body discovered in the burned cabin could not be visually identified. The fire had caused such extensive damage that traditional methods were not possible. For David Lewis's family, this meant facing a difficult and painful next step. DNA testing was the only way to know for certain if the man found inside the destroyed cabin was, in fact, their brother and father, to move forward. Samples were taken from David's sister, Linda Lewis Miller, and his eldest son, Bo. It was a necessary process, but one that weighed heavily on everyone involved. For Bo, the responsibility of helping confirm the identity of his father through genetic testing was heartbreaking. It meant participating directly in a moment no child ever wants to face, the possibility that their parent is gone. The wait for test results brought little peace. Every day carried the tension of anticipation and the dread of what would be confirmed. There was no room left for hope, only the gradual acceptance of reality. For Linda, the process was both surreal and devastating. The sibling bond they had shared now came down to a DNA match. When the results returned, they confirmed what the family feared. The remains belonged to David Lewis. The loss became undeniable, and the grief already present deepened into something permanent. What had begun as a news report about an unidentified body in a fire had turned into personal tragedy. The emotional toll was immense, especially knowing that David's life had ended not just in fire, but in violence. This confirmation closed one chapter in the story, but only raised more questions about how and why David's life was taken. For his family, the mystery remained, now underscored by a painful truth. Following the confirmation of David Lewis's identity, the focus turned to finding out what had happened. It was clear from the beginning that David had suffered injuries. Prior to the fire, authorities confirmed this crucial detail, making it evident that foul play had occurred. Yet despite this, no one has ever been arrested. The case remains open, and the investigation has led to more questions than answers. Law enforcement officials pursued leads, but each one eventually turned cold. The dual arsons, the one at David's cabin and the one 5 miles away, complicated the investigation but yielded little in terms of identifying a suspect. There were no known disputes or immediate red flags in David's life, leaving detectives with a case that lacked both a clear motive and viable suspects. For David's family, this uncertainty has been a constant source of pain. Linda Lewis Miller and other close relatives have made repeated trips to Oregon and even to Alaska, hoping for some kind of progress. Their visits were motivated by love and the belief that a new detail, a new conversation, or even a change in leadership might bring forward a breakthrough. These journeys have become a part of the family's routine acts of both hope and mourning. Each return trip, however, has been met with silence. The lack of updates, the absence of developments, and the persistent unknowns weigh heavily. The years the case has stalled, leaving the family in a limbo where grief and frustration coexist. For Linda and others, the feeling that the case may never be solved is one they live with daily. Still, the family holds on to the belief that answers may come. Until then, they remain engaged, determined to keep David's story from fading. Although the investigation has hit numerous dead ends, their commitment has never wavered. They continue to ask questions, make calls, travel long distances, all in the hope that someone, somewhere, will finally come forward with the truth. In the years since David Lewis's death, his family has found ways to keep his memory alive. Despite the painful lack of justice, with no arrests and no clear answers, they have chosen remembrance over despair. Each year, on the anniversary of David's death, his loved ones gather to honor his life. These gatherings are not marked by elaborate ceremonies, but by quiet, personal moments of reflection. Rooted in love and loss, the family selected a spot in a cemetery near a ball field and area that feels peaceful and connected to the kind of life David valued. There they placed a handmade headstone, crafted with care and intention. It stands not only as a marker of where he rests, but also as a symbol of the enduring love his family carries for him. The headstone is a deeply personal tribute, created outside of formal structures, reflecting the same free-spirited nature David was known for. His three sons, Bo Casey and Skylar, along with extended family members, continue to cope with his absence. They navigate life with the memory of a father, a brother, and a friend who gave freely and lived with kindness. For them, these visits to his resting place are more tea. While the tragedy of David's death remains, his family has made a clear choice to remember him for how he lived, not just how he died. In their annual visits and the stories they continue to share, David's presence endures. The pain of unanswered questions lingers, but in honoring his life, the family ensures that his spirit is never forgotten. David Lewis is remembered best by those who knew him not for the tragedy that ended his life, but for the peaceful and grounded way he lived it. Near Lake Hyatt, in the calm of Oregon's wilderness, David found joy. He built his own boat carefully, patiently, so he could fish in the waters he loved. He was known for his skill, always able to reel in a catch, and it earned him the affectionate nickname Fishhook. The lake, the boat, and the simple act of casting a line into the water are memories that continue to shape how his family sees him. Linda Lewis Miller, Linda's sister, often reflects on these moments. For her, David was always free-spirited and kind, someone who found purpose and happiness in the outdoors. It is that version of her brother, the one surrounded by trees, wind, and open water, that remains closest to her heart. In remembering David this way, she preserves not just the image of who he was, but the feeling he brought into the lives of others. His legacy is not defined by the unanswered questions that still surround his death. Instead, it lives on in the stories shared by his sons, the traditions his family upholds, and the memories that echo through Oregon's landscapes. David Lewis remains a beloved father, brother, and friend. The lake may be quiet now, but for those who remember him, it still carries the presence of a man who lived fully, loved deeply, and left behind a legacy rooted in nature, kindness, and quiet strength.